Okay, so I thought I'd start off this brand new series called #Relationship Goals by asking you a question that's actually asked to all of us in the book of James. There's this author in the New Testament. He wrote a book, and his name was James. I guess he was real original with his book titles. And he wrote in chapter 4 a question that I think if we wrestle with it enough, it will help you in all of your relationships that you have in your life. But specifically for us married folk in the room, if we ask this question, it can help us fix, heal, mend, or just be happier in our marriages. And so here's the question that James is asking us. What is causing quarrels and fights among you? What is causing the beef? What is causing quarrels and fights among you? You know, this week I was at Sam's Club and I saw a couple kind of going at it, and I felt like asking them this question. You know, I'm not their pastor, so I held back. But if I was to ask this question, I bet you they would say, oh, I'll tell you what's going on. I'll tell you why there's drama. I'll tell you why there's a fight in our relationship. It's all because of him. He said that he would never do this and this and this. And then guess what he did? He went out and did it, that dirty dog. And if I asked her, she'd probably be like, if I asked him what was wrong, he'd be like, she promised she would do this and this and this in our marriage. And guess what? She has not lived up to those expectations. And it probably would be a lot of finger pointing. Now, I'm not just assuming the worst. I listened enough to their argument from across the store to know that was the gist of their story. And the reality is, anytime that you are in a fight with someone, an argument, a quarrel, a disagreement, whether it be a work relationship, a friendship, or in your marriage, there's probably a little bit of finger pointing going on. You're probably like, if only they would treat me different. They're the ones bringing the conflict into my world. My world was harmonious. I'm an angel from heaven. I do nothing wrong, and it's all the people around me. And James is actually asking this question, and he doesn't stop right here by asking us just this question like, okay, let me ask a question and see what you have to say. James is using it as a teaching opportunity. And so here's what James is actually saying. He's saying, what is causing fights and quarrels among you? Don't you know that they come from the evil desires at war within you? James is like, whoa, not so fast. I get it. You want to blame the other side. You want to point some fingers. You want to act like the world's the one dumping its drama, dumping its conflict onto you. But maybe, just maybe, that's not as true as you think it is. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen a person who kind of goes from relationship to relationship, from workplace to workplace, from church to other church, and no matter where they're at, it seems like drama's kind of following them? We all have a flavor of that because we have a blind side to us, because sometimes we're unwilling to just stop for a moment and say, maybe I'm doing something to sabotage some relationships inside of my life. And so that's what James is trying to point to us. He says, maybe, just maybe, the conflict that's in your marriage, the conflict that's in your relationships, the conflict that's in your friendships, it's not because of the other person, but maybe there's something going on inside of you, something broken inside of you, something hurt, some wound, something's at war with inside of you. And because of that, there is an external conflict because there is an internal conflict. And that's our next message point. The reason we have external conflict with other people, the reason we have drama with other people, is usually because we have an internal conflict inside of us. Okay, so who's not married yet in this room? We got any single people in the house? Okay, I see you. I see you single people take notes of each other. You can swap phone numbers after church. Just kidding. Well, if you haven't been married yet, let me share some wisdom from the married folk in the room about what it's like to be married. Because when you're single, the next stage is you fall in love or start dating someone who you're hot for, right? And so usually when people start to date, they will have a list of what? Expectations. You'll see this on TV or hear someone sing like, oh, I've got a list of what I'm looking for in a man or in a girl and what she's got to be like and what she's got to do and what he has to live like. I've got a list going, right? the world or psychologists or psychiatrists, they would call that expectations, right? We have certain expectations that we're looking for in someone else. And then what happens? We see someone and they're super cute and they capture your eye and the spark is there and you feel a vibe going on and you push that list of expectations off to the side as if you didn't have a list at all. And you're starting to think, it doesn't matter because we're just dating. It's not that serious. I don't need to worry about my list of expectations yet. And then that relationship progresses a little bit and you fall in love and you're the smitten kitten over that other person, right? And you're thinking, we're not married yet. I don't have to worry about all those expectations. I mean, maybe we'll talk about one or two, but overall, we'll fix that some other day. That's for tomorrow's relationship. And then what happens? A year goes by, and you're thinking, I need a ring. Or you're thinking, I better put a ring on it, or I'm going to lose it, right? Just like Beyonce says, if you liked it, you should have put a ring on it. I'm totally botching that song. I'm sorry. Anyways, so you put a ring on it, right? Because you want to capture that. You want to keep that person in a relationship with you, and your expectations yet have been addressed. Why? Because you're smitten and in love, and you get the butterflies in your tummy, and you're just so ooey-gooey for that other person. And so your fiancés. And then the big wedding day happens, and you get married, and he's looking forward to, well, we all know what he's looking forward to, and then everybody's looking forward to the honeymoon period, right? And you're not talking about your expectations during the honeymoon period, are we? Because the honeymoon period is pure bliss. We're just in love and enjoying this first stage of married life, and for some people, honeymoons last weeks, not the actual trip, but just the season of life. And other people, it might be months. Or if you're really, really head over heels for each other, maybe a year, 2 years at most. And then you're just weird if it's still going on, right? No one's that in love. But what happens? Eventually, that hot romance sizzles down. And then you start thinking about all those expectations that you have, all those things that are unmet. And the unmet expectations start to create some tension in the marriage, right? And some of those expectations you might not have even known you had. But now here we are, and you're married to someone who's not meeting your expectations. And there's drama. Now, here's something important. We're going to talk about expectations today, but we need to start addressing, talking, looking at what is the expectations that we have for one another. And then we need to start to resolve some of these expectations. Because if you don't resolve the unmet expectations in marriage, it can create long-term hurt and pain for your relationship. And you don't want that, right? It's going to be the first thing that starts to divide you as a couple, because long-term, it will make you very, very unhappy. Because a lot of our conflict early on in marriage, or even today, comes from unmet expectations. He's not doing this for you, you're not doing this for you, and it started like this, and the gap starts getting wider and wider and wider and wider. And eventually you get to a place where you guys are just two different people, and you're wondering, how did you get here? And the pain shifted from pain to bitterness, anger, resentment. And ultimately, if the bitterness, anger, and resentment's not addressed, it becomes selfishness. Because you'll start to think, you know what, if he's not going to do that, she's not going to do that for me, then I'm just going to live life for me. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to do what makes me happy, okay? Because obviously they don't care what I do, so I'm just going to live about me, and they can just go get bent, okay? They could go figure it out. And so then we start living selfish lives, isolated from one another. And we're so far away from that honeymoon period, from that sizzling romance. And so, good thing that you're here today, because what we're going to be talking through is going to help us rekindle some of those flames and start to merge the gaps. So that way, we can put some of these unmet expectations down at ease. And so, James is saying, hey, what's causing the fights and quarrels among you? Don't you know that those things come from within? And so he goes on to say this in James verse 2, chapter 4. You want what you don't have. You scheme and kill to get it. You are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it. So you fight and wage war and take it from them. James is telling us that this unmet expectation that creates some conflict in your marriage, your conflict in your marriage comes from you not getting what you want. Let's be honest. A lot of the fights in the marriage or in any relationship, with your parenting relationship, if you're a parent, or if you're just in any friendship, a lot of the fights you get came down to you not getting what you wanted in that relationship. It didn't work out the way that you thought it would work out. And so that's our next message point here. The basis for our internal conflict is that we're not getting our own way. We're not getting it in our own way. And so what happens again, we're frustrated, we're confused, we're angered. We just don't know how to put words to it. We're like, ugh, right? Now there's this verse in there, there's these words in there that James is talking about, and he says we're at war. Now no one's picking up like battle axes and going to town like Viking style on each other. At least I hope not, okay? That's not what James is meaning in this verse. When he says you're at war, he's meaning you go to extremes sometimes to get what you want. You're frustrated, you're mad, you're angry, and you're going to go to the extreme to get what you want in that friendship or in that relationship. And so some of you, you know what that extreme is. Some of you are loud, right? And so you're going to extreme. I can't speak now. Your extreme is screaming and yelling. And so you like to get really loud when you don't get what you want. And you think if you can get just so loud, maybe if I yell loud enough, I can win this argument, and I can bring them over to my side. And then if I bring them over to my side, maybe this conflict will go away. And so you choose hooting and hollering and yelling at people. And I don't think that's going to work out long term for you. And then there's another person in the room who's Mr. or Mrs. Silent. When someone makes you mad and someone hurts your feeling, you're like, you yell at me, I'm not talking to you for 3 days. You can make your own lunch and take it to work. You can take your own kids to school. We'll see what I'm just doing nothing. I'm sleeping in tomorrow. We'll see how you like your life when you yell at me like that, you know? And so you get all silent on them, and that's your war tactic, okay? So there's many war tactics we can have when we get angry at people. We usually go to extremes because we're trying to win the fight. And friends, I have to tell you this. Going to war with one another, chasing each other, metaphorically, hopefully there's no real physical chasing going on in this room. Whatever war tactic you take, it never ends with a win. You might think you won the fight. You might think you won the battle. And even if it seems like they gave up and raised the white flag and said, fine, do what you want, there's no victory there. They just gave up. You've hurt them. You've hurt them at a new level, such a deep level they don't even care if you're right or wrong and if they're right or wrong anymore. They just, okay, I give up, I submit, whatever, just shut up. I'm done with this. You broke me. You pushed me past the point of caring anymore. And so, friends, James is telling us, cut it out, because this is not going to lead to healthy relationships. We shouldn't do this with friends. We shouldn't do this with coworkers, and we definitely shouldn't do this with our spouse that's supposed to be the love of our life. And so there's got to be a better way at living. And so James, because he's teaching us this stuff in the verse, he goes on to say this, yet you don't have what you want because you haven't asked God for it. You don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. And I get this can be a little confusing because you're saying, hey, aren't we talking about fighting and arguments and my argument and conflicts coming because I'm not getting something out of this relationship that I wanted? Now, what does God and asking God have anything to do with this? Well, is it possible that there is something in your life that you're expecting your relationship with another person to fulfill that was never their responsibility to fulfill? Think about it. You're looking to your spouse for contentment and happiness and joy. And your spouse can be that person in your life at times. Your marriage, your love, your friendships, whatever relationship you're looking at, it can bring as a byproduct happiness and contentment. But it's never to be the source of all of your happiness and contentment. Your marriage was not created to be the source of your happiness and contentment in life. It can have it as a byproduct in the seasons where you naturally feel love. But like I said last week in the sermon, there's going to be other seasons where you don't naturally feel love. You're just not in it. And then love becomes an action where you choose the love regardless of the feeling that you have going on. Even though I'm not feeling I'm in love right now, I'm choosing to step out and engage in this marriage because I love that person. And then maybe in the next season, you'll start to feel that again. But again, your marriage was not created to be the main source that we're to draw happiness from, that we're to draw contentment from. We're supposed to lean on God for that. He's the only perfect being that has ever lived. So he's the only perfect source for contentment and happiness. And so yes, that's great that your spouse makes you happy at times. That's great that you're content at times when it comes to your relationship. But when you don't feel content and when you're at odds with your spouse, it's not breakup time. It's lean into Jesus time when that happens, okay? Because there will be seasons where you're like, I don't know about that guy anymore, okay? But we're going to choose Jesus anyways and stick with it and lean in. Let's go on and read what verse 3 says. And even when you ask, so he's kind of building off this idea that you should ask God for things. And maybe you're looking in the wrong place. So go ahead and ask God for it. Maybe you don't have it because you need to ask God for it. And then he says this, even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong. You only want what will give you pleasure. Now this is almost a warning from James. He's basically telling us God is not a cosmic Coke machine. Okay, you know what a Coke machine is, right? It's this machine that I take some coins, and because of inflation, it's now probably like $3, and I stick $3 of quarters in this machine, and because I gave this machine money, I push a button, and contractually, this machine owes me a soda, right? We all understand how to work a Coke machine, but so many treat our prayer life like a cosmic Coke machine, like I did this for you, God, you do this for me, God, like a transaction, and that's not how it works. And so James is teaching us here, hey, sometimes when you ask for something that's all wrong because your motives, they're not in the right place. Last summer, we went through a whole sermon series on prayer, and we talked about how God answers each and every prayer that you've ever prayed to him. Did you know that he's listening to all your prayers, and he cares about every word you've ever uttered to him? And he's always answered them. He answers it one of 4 ways. Yes, which usually makes us happy when he does that, right? Yes. And then there's a no. Sometimes he says no to us. And then there's a, hey, you need to grow up first. Like, I want to give you that, but you're just not mature enough for that, and that will hurt you right now if I give you that. So grow up a little bit, become a little bit more mature, and I'll give you that. So then there's a grow up. And then the last one is, wait, the timing's not right, and God's timing is perfect. So he's like, wait, the timing's not right. Give it a moment. Let's wait a moment and see what happens. I'll give it to you when the timing is right. Now, here's the thing. How many people are parents in the room? Like everybody. Okay. So apparently I need to do a parenting series, not a relationship series, because y'all like each other. Okay. Here we go. Moms and dads, when you say no to your kids, does that make you a bad person? All the kids in the room are like, yes. They're mean. They don't give me what I want. Finally, the preacher said something. Yet when we hear God say no, we're like, what a mean God. How dare he say no to me? Why didn't he say yes? We say no to our kids, and that doesn't mean we don't love them. That doesn't mean we don't care for them. That doesn't mean we don't want the best for them. The same is true with your Heavenly Father. He wants all that for you too. He cares about you, wants the best for you. He's just saying no because he knows that's not right for you. And sometimes you know this because the other day you were at the grocery store and you were like, woo, dodged a bullet on that prayer because you saw that person from high school that you thought was the one walk by. And inside you thought, time has not been good to them. Right? Okay, this is getting really bad and it's turning into a Garth Brooks song, so we need to move on from unanswered prayers, okay? Again, when it comes to conflicts, maybe we need to change our point of view. Instead of looking at the issue being out here, maybe the issue is more about in here. Maybe I have a hurt, a wound. an issue that's going on in my life, and because I have this hurt, this wound, this issue that's going on in my life, I'm subconsciously sabotaging and hurting other things that are going on around me, or have very little margin for forgiveness, or very little margin for air that other people have in their life because I'm hurt and I'm upset and I'm at my maxed out capacity. And then I'm not asking God for anything. I'm not asking God to move in my relationship. I'm not seeking God for contentment in my life. I'm not seeking God as the source of my happiness. I'm looking at my wife, or I'm looking at my husband. And so I'm leaning into my relationship right now. And so, okay, so we tracking where we're at. And so here we are. We're to ask God to be the source, the contentment, the happiness in our life. And we're to look at, is there an inner conflict? Is there something going on inside of me that's sabotaging my relationships around me? And so the remaining time that we talk today, I want to talk to us about how do we handle conflicts in a healthy way. Like, how do we resolve these conflicts that happen inside of us and between other people in a healthy way? And so number one in your notes, under how to handle this, understand many conflicts are perpetual. Most of your marital conflicts are ever going. In fact, the statistic is 70% of your marriage problems will always be there. Isn't that comforting? Welcome to Wilson Avenue. We are just full of good vibes here. Let's pray and end in prayer there. Okay, 70% of your issues in your marriage are probably going to be there. Why? Because two types of people that are just different than each other, they get together. Think of it. A morning person marries what? A night owl, right? That's classic Chris and Stephanie. I'm the morning person. I wake up at 6 a.m. with the boys. They're out the door on the bus at 6:30 in the morning. And then I sit down at my computer with a cup of coffee, and I start working on my sermon at 6:35 in the morning. By the time Stephanie wakes up, I'm 3 hours deep into work. I've drank so much caffeine that I'm like, shaking from it all. I look about the twitch. It's got so much caffeine in me. And she's walking down the stairs, rubbing the sleep out of her eyes, and I'm like, talking about everything to her, just, 100 miles per hour speaking. And she's like, would you shut up? I'm trying to wake up. I don't have the capacity at this moment to hear you. She's like, give me an hour or two and leave me alone, and then I'll come back to you at lunchtime and we'll be ready to talk. Why? Because I'm a morning person and she's a night owl. But then 9 p.m. comes around and she walks in the room ready for business. Not that kind of business. Mind out of the gutters. She comes in with spreadsheets and journals and pens and calendars, and you don't understand, 9 p.m. for me, you might as well say 3 a.m. in the morning. Like, I'm crawling in bed thinking, woo, I made it up late tonight. Like, I am done. There is not a thought going through my brain. Like, some of you would probably understand this, but when my brain is tired, it's like an empty cave. Like, there is not a thought. It's just like the howling wind that can blow through that cave. And that's about as much intellectual energy as you're going to get from me at 9 p.m. at night. Like, I'm zoning out and ready to close my eyes and be dead until morning time, okay? I think I actually do die a little bit in my sleep, but that's another personal issue I'll unpack later with my therapist. So here we are. It's 9 p.m., and here comes Stephanie. Hey, I just wanted to talk through your work week and look at what schedule you have, and then I want to talk about the boys' calendar, and I want to talk about what the school project is we have to get ready for tomorrow afternoon, and I want to talk about the vacation schedule. Oh, we're going on vacation this summer, so we should buy the flights tonight because buying the flights now early makes more sense. And I'm thinking, I don't know what are we doing in June? Like, it's January. I don't know what the church will be doing. And, it's just a lot for me at 9 p.m. And so easily you could see where the two worlds collide and that where you have a chance to nip at each other and cause wounds to each other. And so the solution to that is compromise, right? Maybe I figure out a meeting like, let's talk about that over lunch tomorrow when we're both awake and happy. Or it's suck one up, Chris, get up out of bed, pour a cup of coffee, and try to hang with this conversation. Try to find a middle ground. Now, it's not just morning owl or morning owl. See how I messed that up? It's not just morning bird and night owl that get together. You also get people who are like the saver and the spender get married, right? And the saver freaks out a little bit when they realize they've married a spender. And the spender's like, I bought a vacation package for us. We've bought a new car. We're upgrading the kitchen. In fact, let's just get rid of this house altogether and go get a different house. And the saver's like, you're trying to spend all our money. You're trying to make us broke. And the saver's like, how dare you? I'm trying to build quality of life. I'm trying to make lasting memories with you. How dare you put that accusation on me, right? Saver and spender. Now, we could go on and on all day about the differences between people. And if you've been married for more than a hot minute, you know that there's a difference between you and your spouse in one way or another. And so, here's your homework. Your homework on how to handle conflict in your marriage is to figure out what yours are. Identify what your differences are. Identify what your differences are. Now, here is some ground rules, because I see some of you already getting a list going in the pew right now. We're not doing it here at church. And number 2, don't hold on to this till you get mad at him or her this week and be like, I am so angry we're making that list that Pastor Chris was talking about. Number 1, he's a jerk. Number 2, he's still a jerk. No, don't do it when you're angry. Wait when things are calm. Come together and just kind of talk through some of the things that are a little different. And then number 2, what you're going to do is talk about what you can learn to live with, right? Because the goal is to meet in the middle, to live in compromise world, okay? Here's the deal with meeting in the middle. We're talking about expectations here. You have some expectations. He has some expectations. You're just a little different than he is, and he's different than you are. And so we're jotting down on this list. We're going to try to learn how we can live together. And a biblical model of a marriage is where 2 people get together and they try to outserve each other. Okay, and so together we're going to work together to try to one-up each other in meeting them where they're at, which means we're going to compromise on a few things. So learn what you can live with. Disclaimer, I'm not asking anyone to be a doormat in the room, okay? If one of the spouses is treating you bad and being mean to you and not willing to work on the marriage and just kind of keeps going out and doing bad to you over and over and over, I'm not saying it's biblical. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that spouse is taking you to divorce. That's just the reality. Your marriage will probably be in a divorce if they don't stop doing that. And so spouses, if that's you, cut it out because you're destroying the marriage. Stop being so selfish. Work on the marriage. We've got to start figuring this out. Now, learning what we can live with. Here's another way Stephanie and I are different than each other. She loves seafood. I don't understand why people love seafood. I'm like Nemo. Fish are friends, not food. Why are we eating the aquarium? What is going on here? And you know what's weird about seafood people, which I know most of you are, being on the Gulf? Don't worry, you don't have to update me at the church. You'll tell me anyways. I know you're all seafood junkies in here. What's crazy about people who love seafood, you can't comprehend why someone does not like seafood. It drives you nuts. And you think, he just hasn't had great seafood yet. That's the problem. I'll be the one to save his palate. I'll introduce him to the right type of seafood or fish. You know how I know this? Because y'all torture me with your seafood. Every time we go out to a restaurant, you're like, try this. And you stick the fork in my mouth. And it tastes just as fishy as the last fish. And you're like, this isn't fish. This is a critter. Oh, that makes it any better, huh? Because it had legs and crawled on the ocean floor? No, thank you. Someone told me the other day when you had your crawfish, well, this isn't seafood, this is ditch food. Did you just hear what you said? I'm supposed to like this? And you just sucked the little thing's brains out. Okay, I know I'm not crazy here. Seafood's gross, okay? But I will compromise because my wife is a seafood junkie. And no matter how hard she's tried, no matter how expensive the fish is she's ordered to try to convert me over to her side, it ain't working. But the compromise is I can go to Felix's and order a steak, right? And she can have whatever fish they have on the menu. Learn to see what we can live with. I can serve her by not always insisting that we go to my type of a restaurant where I have endless options. Once in a while, I could take one for the team so she can go to a fun restaurant. Even if that means once in a while I have to eat a little seafood because they didn't have anything but seafood. I've done some oysters before. They're gross, but I've swallowed them. The other day, I ate some shrimp with friends, and I pretended like I liked it, but I was like, I don't get it. But okay, I can take one for the team every once in a while because I love my wife that much that you and I could eat some salty food that should never have left the water. Learn to figure out what you can live with and have some compromise. Again, a biblical marriage is where you're trying to outserve one another. You know what's crazy when we get in this competition to outserve one another? Where you're trying to go at it and they're trying to go at it, and when you're trying to outserve each other, you're more focused on their wants, needs, and expectations, and they're more focused on your wants, needs, and expectations. And guess what happens when we get in a competition to outserve each other? All the needs and wants and expectations somehow magically get met in the marriage. Did you know majority of our marital problems are because we have pride and hard-hearted, and we're like, we want them to come over to us. But if just both of us would work on the other person by doing more of what they want and compromise, you'd be surprised how easily your marriage can thrive if you just started putting the other person first. Okay, before I go on in the sermon and close it out, anyone who signed up for baptism, I need to release you right now so you can go upstairs and get changed. Would everybody clap for those who are choosing to get baptized? If you're serving on the team to help them, or if you're going out to get baptized, go ahead and go out the back doors, and there'll be a team out there that will help you figure out where you're going, okay? Here we go. 70% of marital conflict comes from an inner conflict, right? That's what we're talking about. And we just talked about how we can resolve a lot of that inner conflict. But here's the problem. That's only 70%. That means there's still 30% of drama to be solved in the marriage. And so what are we going to do to solve the 30% that's left over? We're going to resolve it through forgiveness. Because there are times where it wasn't an internal thing going on with you, it was an internal thing going on with them, and they did hurt you. But now that they've hurt you, it became an internal thing for you. I know this is getting really redundant, but just track with me if you can. We want you to resolve with forgiveness. And just to be clear again, I'm not saying that you forgive so the person tomorrow can go back out and do it again. If there's a person who keeps hurting you over and over and over again, that's not the type of person I'm wanting you to be. You're not to be a doormat. Don't hear me wrong. But we're going to all blow it at times. We're all going to hurt each other. There's not a human in this room, there's not a human in this earth that won't hurt their spouse sooner or later. We're just going to hurt each other because we're all broken people. We're all messed up, and none of us are perfect. And so we have to resolve our conflict through forgiveness. I've been through recovery, 12-step recovery, and I know no matter what reason people go through a 12-step recovery, forgiveness is one of the major tools that people use to heal. And here's what's crazy, because no matter how bad of a reason that person went through recovery, maybe it was abuse or something, forgiveness is less about letting the other person off the hook, okay? Sometimes we think, well, I'm not forgiving him. Did you know what he did or she did to me? He does not deserve my forgiveness. And that's 100% true. None of us did. But Jesus still forgave us. Last week I had a whole sermon on love and how we're to love one another as Jesus did, right? And we're to have grace and forgiveness because that's what Jesus did for us. When we didn't deserve it, he still loved and forgave us. They don't deserve your forgiveness, and you don't deserve their forgiveness, but we're to give it anyways, okay? And I've learned it's not about letting them off the hook. It's more about choosing to let go of the pain. I've seen it through people. I've done it myself through recovery. When you get to the step that's all about making amends and recovery, it's a game-changing step because that's where you go and offer forgiveness or you go and seek forgiveness. And what you're doing is you're saying, hey, it doesn't matter what your response is. I'm choosing to let this pain go. I've forgiven you of this hurt, and I'm walking away. I'm leaving it with Jesus. And I'm not going to harbor that pain, that hurt, that ouch, the inner conflict anymore. I'm dropping that there with God and walking away. And did you know that most of the reason why people get divorced, like the number one reason, is because of a hardness of heart. Hardness of heart is the main reason why people get divorced. Again, we hear people say things like, I just don't love him anymore. I just don't love her anymore. Or she doesn't love me, he doesn't love me anymore. And we hear these hardness of heart defined in a different way. We just kind of fell out of love. We're no longer in love anymore. Or we're just two different people now. We kind of grew up, we got married so young, and now we're just two different people now. And because we're two different people now, we're better off apart than we are together. Friends, that's all hardness of heart. That's just that you've lived long enough in a broken situation that you've bought into this idea that this is the only outcome that could be. You're like, this is it. Look, Scripture tells us when two people get married, they become one, right? But we all know a separation happens after a little bit. Someone gets hurt and we get torn apart, right? And the first conflict, the first problem in the marriage, the first issue, the first hurt, it might rip us apart a little bit. But when we offer forgiveness and we work through the conflict, it lets us mend the wounds. The problem is, most of us sweep it under the rug. Most of us don't want to work through the conflict. And so relationship gets ripped apart a little bit. And you could live in a marriage that's kind of happy, right? It seems, for the most part, functional. The problem is because you didn't resolve this conflict, eventually another conflict and pain enters the marriage. And then another conflict and pain enters the marriage. And then another conflict and pain. And again, you get to be where you're way out here and you're no longer anywhere close to being together. And you're wondering, how did that couple ever get so ripped apart? Because when they got married, they were crazy about each other. They thought this was the one forever. And now they're way out here saying we're just two different people. We're better off apart than together. And it all comes down to us not willing to resolve the conflict. So, I want you to do this. I want you to start being truthful. Here's your 2 action steps to resolve that conflict. Start being truthful. You don't got to lie about it anymore. It's better off to hurt the other person and go through an argument and go through tears and be truthful and get it out in the open and then work on a game plan on how to resolve it than to keep harboring the pain. They probably know about it anyways. You're probably not that good at keeping it a secret. That's just awkward enough that no one's talking about the elephant in the room. And so, instead of waiting till it's a disaster that you have to talk about, I want the marriages that are here at Wilson Avenue to be proactive. Okay? We're going to be proactive in our marriage. So here's what this. If you're in a place where you want to be proactive in your marriage, grab that pen, write this on the side of your outline. I'm going to give you 3 questions, and I'm going to tell you how to use these questions. You can add this to your homework. I'm all about homework this week, okay? Here we go. Number 1, what are you concerned about? In our current situation, in our present relationship, in our current marriage, what are you concerned about? And this doesn't even have to be at a point of disaster. You could just share a little bit of your concerns, what you're struggling with. Number 2, what do you wish? And this is like looking forward to the future. Now that we talked through some things we're concerned, what do you wish that concern could look like in the future? If we were to do some things different, where would you want it to be? Now, be realistic. If you're like, babe, I got to get away. We have not been on enough vacations. We need to take some time off and just enjoy each other. Don't go to the next step and be like, I wish we'd get on a private jet and fly to Italy. Like, that ain't going to happen, okay? Let's make it a reality. Adjust your expectations. But talk about, like, you know what? I wish we could pay off some of this debt because I feel really uneasy with all these credit card bills that come in every month. I feel like we can't go out to dinner because we have so much debt in our life. I'd love to pay off some debt. Talk through what you wish it could look like. And then the last question is, what can I do to help? This is serving. How can I help to get us there? Like, what can I do? What can you do? What are we going to do to help us get there? Be proactive in your marriage. There's no reason to wait till it's dysfunctional and then try to find healing. Fix it before it breaks. Work on it now. Now, some of you are in a room, you're like, Pastor Chris, that would have been good to have 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But right now, if you sat my husband and I down, or my wife and I down, and you made us ask those questions, it would be nuclear war. Like, this would be a no-go. And if that's where you're at, where you don't feel safe having these kinds of conversations, I want to encourage you to go get professional help. Go to marriage counseling. Oh, but it's expensive, Pastor Chris. We can't afford it. I don't care. Figure it out. Stop paying the cell phone payment. Let the car get repossessed. Move to an apartment and move out of that house. Sell all the furniture. Figure out a way to get funding to pay for that marriage counselor. Because guess what? If you let this thing go on and you get a divorce, all that stuff goes away anyways. Stop paying the cable bill. Get rid of the internet bill. Like, let's get some money and go to professional help. Well, I just don't think that's for me. I think weak people go to counseling, Pastor Chris. Us strong, bold people, we don't need counseling. Stop projecting. That's sissy talk. You are projecting. You are scared. You are worried that you might go to counseling and hear that you need to change a few things. To hear that you might need to talk to the counselor, that the counselor might tell you you need to start treating your spouse differently. You're afraid, and so you're projecting like, I'm tough, Mr. Macho, Mrs. Macho. I don't need counseling. Those people need counseling, but not me. I'm strong. No, strong, courageous, brave people get vulnerable in their marriage. They put their marriage first. It's not about their pride. It's about their relationship. I will sacrifice my pride and any cool factor the little bit that I might have any day to save my marriage because my wife matters to me that much. And I want my boys to see what a healthy biblical marriage looks like. And healthy marriages get help when they need help. They figure it out. Another option you can have is that we are kicking off a program called Re-Engage mid to late next month. It's a marriage enrichment program. It helps with all different types of marriages. You can be in a good spot, you can be in an okay spot, or you can be in a terrible spot in your marriage. And regardless where you're at in your marriage, you can go to Re-Engage, a groups-centric program that has teachings and small group studies and conversations, and you can grow in your marriage. And you'll start to build some really good friendships beyond your marriage in that program. And it's starting late next month in March. And instead of me describing what Re-Engage could look like, let me share a story from a friend that went through Re-Engage the last time I worked at a church that hosted it. Here's what they said. My husband and I have been married for 35 years and finally admitted we have been living separate lives now in our marriage for at least half of those 35 years. With our kids moving out and going to college and looking at having an empty nest, we were forced to face each other and figure out if we wanted to be married anymore. There was actions, attitudes, unresolved hurt, anger that we refused to work through for many years. We were miserable married people, but Re-Engage has given us the tools to communicate better and forced us to communicate the issues that we have been avoiding for years. Re-Engage brought sound biblical teaching back to the forefront and helped us focus on serving our spouse, not ourselves. Things are not perfect. Old habits die hard, but we are hopeful God will continue to do a good work in us, and we seek Him first above all else. That could be you. That could be you. I've seen people who, because in California, you get a divorce, it makes you wait 6 months before that divorce becomes legal. Judge signs on it, gavel goes down, 6 months of waiting before it's legal. It's called the cool down period. I've seen people go through Re-Engage in those 6 months and go back and pull those court orders and say, never mind. I've seen people who've gone divorced go to Re-Engage, and then at the Re-Engage celebration, because you throw a party the last night, they get married all over again at the Re-Engage. I've seen couples come in. Dozens of couples recommit their vows to each other at the end of Re-Engage. If this is something you're interested in, that yellow card in your program, there's a box you can check on that, and I will reach out to you about Re-Engage launching next month. It's going to be awesome for your marriage. Okay, here's your last fill in the blank. Be loving. And here's how I'm going to do you dirty now, okay? I'm not going to tell you how to be loving. I'm going to give you one last bit of homework. Last week, the whole sermon was about being loving, okay? It's about loving as Jesus loved you. We already kind of hit on that a moment ago. And if you need to know, how am I supposed to be loving? This is the part that my spouse needs to hear, Pastor Chris. How dare you do me dirty this way? Then make date night like all about watching that sermon together. Load it up on the TV, on the computer, on your phone. Go on a church website. Find us on YouTube. Find the last sermon from last week. It's week 6 of 5 years from now. And it talks all about how we are called to be loving and how we're to live this out. But real quick, I could tell you right now, love isn't arrogant, love doesn't get irritated, and love doesn't get resentful. And if you're in a place where your marriage, where you feel love can be irritating, resentful, angry, arrogant, got some homework. Watch that sermon because we dive into how we don't treat one another that way. I'm going to invite the band to come back up, and they're going to lead us in another song. And here's what's going to happen. I'm going to run and go put some swim trunks on. And we're going to get back there, and we're going to watch some people take some next right steps of water baptism. While they're walking up, would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for the opportunity today to come here and just investigate. How do I let the inner conflict that's inside of me not sabotage my marriage? God, I pray that we are people that want to have healthy relationships, whether it be relationships with coworkers or family members or with our spouse. Help us to take our next right step and start applying your biblical wisdom and truth to our marriages. In Jesus' name, amen.